This is the homework helper for Chapter 8, Section 3 in the 8th grade textbook entitled Circles. Okay, so in 1 through 6, the directions are the same, so we'll approach these the same way. And it says for us to find the circumference of the circle, both in terms of pi and to the nearest tenth, using 3.14 for pi. So the first thing we need here is the formula. The formula is the same you saw it in class. Remember, there's two ways depending on what you're working with. If you're working with the radius, you're going to use the formula 2 pi r. And if you're using the diameter, you're using pi times the diameter. And as you can see here, the questions in 1 through 6 are a melange of those two. Sometimes they give you the radius, sometimes they give you the diameter, so you probably want to have both in your pocket. Okay, so let's start off with the radius question, 2 pi r. So I'm supposed to take 2, and multiply it by pi, and multiply that by the radius, which is 10. Now, the reason I did not change pi to 3.14 yet, even though we know pi is 3.14, is because they've asked us for two things. They've asked us for an answer with pi, and then they've asked us for an actual numeric answer where we go to the nearest tenth for rounding. So if I'm writing this with pi, I don't really have a lot to do here. All I have to do with pi is put the 2 and the 10 together, and of course it's getting combined with multiplication because there's multiplication signs here. So that's 20 pi. That's one of our first answers. Then they ask us to do this with numbers, so we're going to do 20 times 3.14 now, which is going to be 62.8, and that's the other answer they want. Again, they want both, so you need both here. Both of these are the answers to question 1 per the directions. Now we'll try that with number 2. Number 2 there, they've given us the diameter instead, so I'm going to use that diameter formula you see up here, pi times the diameter. So that's going to be pi times 13. Well, that's pretty much all the work done already for the one answer. That's just going to be 13 pi. And then to find the actual numeric value, we're going to take 13 and multiply it by 3.14, which is 40.82. But remember, directions say to the nearest 10, so that's going to be 40.8. And of course, the units on these, because we're just finding the circumference, would be the same as the units given in the question. So this one is going to be in inches, and this one's going to be in centimeters. All right, let's go ahead and go down to look at 7 through 12 now. In 7 through 12, we're finding the area of the circle, both in terms of pi and to the nearest tenth, using 3.14 for pi. So, very similar directions, but this time we're finding the area, which means we're going to have to use the pi r squared formula. So, of course, that means if we have a diameter, we're going to have to make sure we cut that in half and then plug it in. Okay, so let's start off with number 7 there, a circle with a radius of 9 inches. So that means I'm going to take pi and multiply it by 9 squared. Well, 9 squared is, of course, 81, and when I combine that with pi, that's just 81 pi. And again, they wanted the 2 answers, so that is one of our answers. Now we're actually going to figure out what 81 times pi is equal to. 81 times pi, or 81 times 3.14, is 254.34, but again, directions say round to the 10th, so that's actually 254.3. And these are our 2 answers. Now, of course, units have to come into play here, just like they did up top. Remember, area is always units squared. Remember, that's what area is by definition. It's the number of square units needed to cover a figure. So since this question was in inches, either one of these would then be inches squared. All right, if we take a look at number 8 then, they gave us the diameter here. So since this formula doesn't account for diameter like we had the option of up here, first thing we want to do is cut this in half. So the diameter is 14, the radius is 7. So this is 3.14 times 7 squared, or pi times 7 squared, whatever you want to say. Well, 7 squared is 49. So 49 pi would be one answer. 49 times pi. Remember, they wanted the answer in terms of pi. And then they want it with a numeric value, so 49 times our 3.14, 153.86, but again, we're rounding to the nearest tenth, so that's going to be 153.9, and that's going to be, in either case, centimeters squared. Okay, let's go ahead and take then a look at finishing this up with question number 13. In question 13, it's asking us to graph a circle with the center 0, 0 that passes through 0, -3. And we're supposed to find the area and circumference of that circle in terms of pi and to the nearest tenth. So this is really a combination of what we've done in both of the sets of previous problems there, but we also have to sketch the circle. Now don't let it scare you. All right, they're telling us that the center of the circle is here at the origin, and the circle goes through 0, -3. Well, 0, -3 means I wouldn't go left or right, but I would go down 3. How does that help me? Well, if the circle goes through that point, we can now establish the radius of said circle. That means the radius of the circle must be 1, 2, 3. 3 jumps. So anywhere I go from the center of the circle, 3 out, is going to be the radius. Now you're saying, well, that sounds tough. Well, not really, because let's just follow the axes. Let's go 3 to the right, and 3 up, and 3 to the left. And if we connect those endpoints, we can see enough of our circle to figure this out. All right. Remember what's key there, even though we've drawn the circle, and that's great, is we figured out that the radius was 3. And that's a part of both of the formulas here. So let's start off with circumference. Obviously, we want to use the one that involves the radius, and that one for circumference was 2 pi r. So for the circumference, it's 2 times pi times the radius being 3, or 6 pi. That will be one of your answers because they wanted it in terms of pi. And then we're going to actually take pi and change it to 3.14 and multiply, and that's going to give me 18.84. If we're rounding to the nearest tenth, that's 18.8. And in either case, that's going to be just units because they didn't give us anything appreciable to work with like inches or feet. Okay, so now let's do the area. Pi r squared for the area. So that's pi times 3 squared, or pi times 9. Well, there's your answer in terms of pi, 9 pi. And now I'm going to take my 9 and multiply it by 3.14 because that's going to give my area, and that's 28.26. And again, because we don't have anything appreciable to work with like inches or feet, we're just going to say units squared.